Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we'll be taking a look at the DANIU HY-18 Digital Infrared Thermal Imager. I got this sent from Banggood and they asked me if I wanted to review it, and I was on the lookout for a digital imager anyway, so great surprise. And yeah, let's have a look at it. So the device itself is really small, and it doesn't have a lot of features on the outside. 3 buttons and a camera at the front, which sticks out rather strangely. But there's a good reason for that, and we'll see that a bit later. But let's start out with a bit of history on digital thermometers and stuff, because it wasn't always that easy. My first digital imager, let's break out the big guns, is this one here. And believe it or not, this thing was incredibly expensive when it was new. These went for thousands and thousands of, back then, German marks. And they were really hard to get. And they were extremely expensive to keep running because they would need to be calibrated every year. And a single calibration of one of these was about 500 marks, which would translate roughly to about $1,000 today. And I still have the last note from the calibration where this was performed. And it was 5 hours at 98 marks, and plus shipping and everything, and it's just insanely expensive, even from back then. But these things had a market, and they were so important when you were developing stuff, so you could have them. And there was a whole industry around them, and they had special shops where you could buy them. And this is one of them. This was one of the shops here. It's Heute GmbH, and take a look at this. This is the finest print from back then. This is super colorful, best material, and they could really afford that. That was how much money they were making. And I think they're still there. This is really high money measuring equipment. It came with such a lot of stuff. It came in a suitcase, and that would make your Samsonite suitcase really look bad. This was the best of the best. And I have some more information on these. This is all that came with this device when I bought it. I bought it used from the company I work for, and even back then it was still really expensive. But I wouldn't have been able to afford one of these when they were new, so I'm pretty happy that way. And this thing still works. It works perfectly, and you just need to touch the handle and it starts measuring. It's really amazing. And it has a dial for setting the emissivity. You can switch between Fahrenheit and degrees Celsius. It's got everything that a modern device would have. It does have a light, which on my device isn't working. So you can see where you were measuring. And take a look at the handle. The handle is real wood. There's a real lanyard on here. It is just, it's amazing. And it's really heavy too. So I love this device, and I love that it's still working. So this was, when it was new, this was bought in 1986, and the last calibration that was performed on it was in 1991. And it came with a lot of documentation, and the documentation is really important when you consider these devices, because, for example, it explains everything about emissivity. For example, aluminium has an emissivity of 0.08, while carbon has 0.81. Black paint, matte black paint, has 0.95. That is why all devices that you can get today are preset to 0.95, because it's just a black surface of paint has 0.95. But there are a lot of other stuff, like for example, copper 0.12, gold 0.02, nickel 0.12, tantalum. I've never had raw tantalum before, but it's 0.19. And back in the days, you needed to know this stuff, because if you were measuring a device and you had a cooler or a device surface and you were measuring it, you wanted to have the right emissivity set, because you wanted to have really good measuring results. You can think of this as the reflectiveness of a particular color on, say, another color. If I shine a red light on white paper, you'll get a white reflection. If I shine a red light on a red piece of paper, you won't know where the red beam is hitting. It will just be a little bit lighter in that spot. Same goes for other colors, or black, for example, which is the same as red. You won't see where the beam is hitting. This is a lot like the way that infrared works. There are just surfaces that will not radiate it that much, and other surfaces will do it better. And so you have the emissivity value that you can program into the device, and it will make it work for you. So yeah, this is a lot of information that came with this thing. And well, I don't know, about 10 to 15 years later, you got the same device looking like this. It was kind of a shrink, but it's still doing exactly the same thing. It still measures 1 point. It measures every second, and it displays the value. And if I take this and shine it down, and I do the same here, we should actually end up with similar temperatures. Oh, we're a bit apart. It's kind of hard to aim this. And now we have something like this device, which is smaller, has more buttons, also has a built-in battery, has a USB connector, and this one's pretty interesting. And you just get more and more in a smaller package. And some of the features of this thing are, I actually had to print them because it's so much information on here. So let's get this up here. Gotta focus. So this thing's got a color display. It's got a resolution of 32 by 24 infrared measuring pixels. It's got a focal length of 55 inches, and it's got an aperture of 35 degrees. It measures at 8 Hertz, 8 times per second. This is 8 times faster than any of these, and it measures 768 points, so it does a lot more work. You can also adjust the emissivity, and it is according to them, accurate to about 2 degrees Celsius. I'm not quite sure about that, but as a rule of thumb, it gets really close. I got some samples and I tested them, and these two are really close to each other, and this one is about, well, 1.5 to 2 degrees off. I don't know if this is better or not. The exact measurement was kind of in the middle. So infrared thermometers are not the most exact way of measuring a temperature. It is more or less getting a really good idea about what a temperature is and where the temperature is located and where it's not. So let's boot this up. I really like the display and everything. It's pretty well thought out. I also like the way the information is presented. It actually gives you a center mark where it will show you the temperature. It has 3 other marks, which is the average temperature, and it will show you a small cross where it has that. It'll show you the maximum and the minimum. Everything is, of course, color coded, so red is hot, blue is cold. And right now you can't really see a thing because everything has the same temperature, but if I put my hand under here, you can make out that it is measuring these really nice. And my fingers are about 28 degrees Celsius. It's kind of cold down here, so that is pretty good guess. Yeah, that's it, just working like this. I'm going to get some samples in a couple of minutes and show you. But I wanted to go through the menus first. So there is one setting menu which you can get to by pressing the on-off button for 3 seconds. That was kind of weird for me to find out. And you need to be really close to 3 seconds, because if you hold it for 5 seconds, it's going to try and power off. And when you have the menu, you actually get all the settings. You have a setting for emissivity. You can set the max temperature and min temperature for the color coding, or you can have it just take the max and min value by itself and adjust itself. It will start showing this as a picture or just the values, and you can turn the serial out, which is basically USB out. You can turn that on or off, and when the USB serial output is turned on, the raw data from the imager, which is in the front here, will be sent out of the device. And supposedly there is software where you can capture this data and record it to a computer, but I wasn't able to find it. I'm still looking for it, but right up to now I haven't found this software. It also seems that the device that I have has a different firmware installed than the one that they have on their website, but no issues with that, and this seems to have more features, and it's working very nicely. And I've already used it for a couple of things, and I really like it. I like the device because I'm not often looking for a temperature value, but I'm looking for hot spots, cold spots. I want to see if a part on a 3D printer gets hot over time, and this is just perfect for that, because I can see if the fan is working good enough, if the cooling fins on the extruder, if they're really cool or if they heat up over time. This is just wonderful, and at $80-something, this is just great. I was thinking about getting a FLIR camera or a CAT smartphone that have infrared cameras for quite some time, and I've always put it off because they're really expensive, and I don't use them often enough to really just have one of them and have it make sense. So I really like this small device. It's really nice, it's really cute, and as I like to say so often, this thing just works for me, and I don't need more than the features that this thing has. What you will note though is a lot of the devices that you get otherwise will have two cameras. They will have one camera which takes a black and white pictures and generates the outlines, where the thermal image is superimposed on top of that. You get that quite often when you see pictures of houses with the windows having different colors, and you can actually see the outline of the house as lines. That is when you have several imaging sensors, one for visible light and the other one for the infrared. This camera, of course, doesn't have that, and for me it doesn't need it because it's still very useful. If I put this on top of a mobile phone while it's running, you'll see the hotspots on the mobile phone. If you put it over a computer mainboard, you will see the hotspots on the computer mainboard, and all of the setup work is basically done by the sensor and the electronics and the software on the device. So it is very easy to use, and you can actually see right now that where I had my hand before on the table, you can just now see the temperature fading out, and it is still warm, and it is now just really slowly cooling off, and the table is just basically letting go of the shadow that was my hand that caused the temperature change. So this thing is working pretty nicely. Also, I like the update of the maximum, minimum, and average temperature every second. So it has 8 Hertz of sampling, but it will update itself every second. If you press the menu button once, you can store and not store. You can stop the last image. You can zoom in and zoom out to sections of that image, and it will just keep all the values like they were before. You can also change the maximum and minimum values. You can stretch it along the average using the plus and minus keys, and it's, like I say, it's simple, but it gets the job done, so it's really, really useful. And yeah, I'm gonna get some measuring targets now, and then we'll have a look at the different values we get from the devices in just a second. So I got 2 different samples of cooling fins that were heated and cooled, and looking at the picture, we can actually see what the temperature is saying that we have got here. We have about 42 degrees on the hot side and 14 on the cold side, but the cold side isn't really making good contact, so it should be cooler. But we have 42 and 14, which is okay. We can actually target the 14 here, and we can target the 42 over here. Now we can try the other thermometer, and we've got, kind of hard to read, we've got 40 something over here, and on this side we get something around, I can't see this. It's even harder for me than for you. We get about 10 degrees, which seems okay. That was 13 degrees. And with the big gun, this is harder to point. Well, it's saying about 35 and 17 on the cold side, but this thing needs a better defined target. If I push this down, I can get it to go roughly in the right direction. It says like 15. And the hot side, oh, the hot side has cooled down, which is about 35 now. And we can check with the other. And if we take a look at it, here we've got 39 maximum, minimum 16. Well, that is kind of close to what we're getting right now. So the values are good. The quality of the image is pretty nice. The scaling of the colors is nice too. And this works out pretty well. If I remove this, the image is going to change and it will not be so exact anymore. And that has to do with the emissivity. This is aluminium, and I just can't make heads of tails of that. If I put my hand really close to it, it will look like my hand is hotter than the aluminium, which it is not. So I suppose hot. This is pretty nice. So let's have a look inside. To turn it off, we press the menu button 5 seconds. It asks us if we want to turn it off. We say yes. Let's clear this up. Get you a bit closer. Here we go. So the entire device doesn't look like much. It's really simple. But if we look inside, and it's really easy to get it open, we can see that first of all, it's got a fairly sized battery, and maybe we can get a focus. Yeah, and which is 1,000 milliamps. It's a single cell battery. It has a protection circuit on it, which is really good. And we can see that we've got an MLX 9640 I2C thermal imaging sensor on there. So even if the device doesn't work, we can still use the sensor and just hook it up to an Arduino or a Teensy and do the measuring ourselves. So that is really nice. We have some test points in there which I really like, and the microcontroller on here is just an STM F103, I would think. I can read the ARM but not the rest. Yeah, it's really simple. But for me, it's simple that cuts it best, if simple works good enough. And this thing, although it's really simple, I really like the way it works. I like the way it presents the data. I like the speed at which it does updates. I kind of like the whole package because it is so small, it is so simple. The only thing that I think they could have done better was to somehow protect the lens out in front here. I'm really going to have to be careful that I don't damage this. I do hope that I find the software for recording the data and getting this thing hooked up to a computer, because that would make it even more useful. But apart from that, it's just a really nice thing, and I think it compares really well to all the other devices that I had before. And these devices were just so much simpler. It was this small device that I got a few years ago, and it was this huge infrared thermometer that I got a long time ago. But although this thing is big and clunky and it doesn't have such a nice focus point, it's still really useful, because you can point it at stuff before touching it, and that is all the difference it needs to keep you from burning your fingers. And this thing does it on a whole other scale. Like, if you point this at a running computer board, you will see which chips get hot. If no chips get hot, it is probably not running at all. It doesn't really need exact values to give you an idea of what is happening. It's all in the interpretation. And that's what I like about these devices. Be it the old one, the reasonably new one. I've actually used this on my son to find out if he's got a fever or not. And yeah, it worked. He had a fever. And this thing just takes it to a whole new level. And regarding the pricing, even used, this one was more expensive than this one, and this one was more expensive when it was new than this one. So there's definitely a huge improvement and a huge step up in quality and information going on, and that is what I like so much of this. And I'm really grateful to Banggood for getting me one of these while they were still all new, because this was just what I needed, and I don't need to spend 400 euros on an expensive camera that I'm going to use 3 times a year, or a mobile phone that has the same features where I'm going to use that feature 3 times a year and have a otherwise clunky big phone. So for me, this is a perfect fit. For you, you'll have to decide, but I think the price with about, I don't know, what was it? $82.99, which is a summer sale. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good way to start without blowing too much money. And as I said, for me, that's the way to go. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good time.